Anyways, welcome. And I always tell people that I don't really know personally. I love having you on as a guest, like you as being somebody I don't really know, because that way it makes it more organic to get to know you. And I enjoy that process way more than kind of asking questions to somebody I already know the answer to. So, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where do you live? What do you do? Kids, no kids? Tell us your whole story. Give us start from like kindergarten and let's move forward. Kidding, not that far back.
Actually, let's do preschool.
Yeah.
I work full time as an exotic animal trainer. I'm
totally awesome.
Like,
that Joe guy.
That's right.
I do have children, so
that's
just like Exotics Ranch, right?
Yeah, no. So I'm from Southern California, and I'm actually back living in my hometown. I have not lived here my whole life. I've also lived in Utah, and I lived in Utah was college. Chicago suburbs was my mission. I lived outside of Madrid, Spain, for probably the 5 most amazing months of my life. And then I've also lived in the Bay Area of California. That was when I was married and separated. And then I moved back down to Southern California to have more family support. So I have 2 boys. They're elementary aged, and I have them like 99% of the time. And I've been working as an educator in elementary education for 17 years. This is my 17th year. And I did dual immersion, bilingual immersion, Spanish. So I'm fluent in Spanish. And yeah, right now, the last couple of years, I've been working as a literacy coach. So.
Okay, so when you said you did the immersion in Spanish, what exactly does that look like? Did you move to like a Spanish country or a Spanish speaking country or?
Well, I did, but not for teaching. So here's an extra tidbit in case anyone wanted to know. When I entered college, I was a music major for vocal performance. Wow. And then after 2 years, I'm an extremely practical person. Like I was raised by very practical, pragmatic people. And after 2 years, I was like, why am I doing this? Like I'm going to be like a voice teacher my whole life, you know? So I was like, I want a job that has security and benefits. So I was looking around, and then I ended up majoring in horticulture, and I was going to do landscape architecture. And then I went on my mission. It was a Spanish speaking mission in Chicago. And after my mission, I was like, oh, I want my life to have something to do with Spanish because I love the culture and the language. And above all, I love the people. And so at that point, I think I was like 1 or 2 semesters away from graduating. I have no idea how I slid under the line there and they let me add a second major. But so I graduated with a major in Spanish and a major in horticulture. And then I started teaching. And so to answer your question, that was a really long answer. The dual immersion part of my teaching is that dual immersion schools, they try to have 50% of the class be native English speakers and 50% of the class be native speakers of whatever the other languages. And so then the kids, there's 2 models. Some districts do like 50-50, where half of the day they're in English and half of the day they're in the other language, and they have different teachers. The district that I worked for, the kindergarten kids start out with 90% of their day in Spanish and 10% of their day in English. And like, so you never speak to your kids in English. They switch. They have a different teacher for that. 2nd grade, it's 80% Spanish, 20% English. 3rd grade, 70-30, and then 60-40, and then the 50-50, like 4th and 5th grade. From then on out, it's 50-50. So there you go.
Okay.
That's
so
cool.
Interesting mix on horticulture and Spanish as far as like,
vocal performance.
Yeah, and vocal performance. So you can like go out, run a crew, and sing while you like mow somebody's yard and like, plant flowers. It's kind of almost like The Sound of Music, but just like with
theoretically, yeah. Yeah, and I'm like, every once in a while, one of my family members will be like, "What's that plant?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I haven't done anything with my horticulture in like 17 years." So
Well, I can tell you there are a lot of majors that truly all you have to do is check off the box that you have a bachelor's degree, right? And so it can be an underwater basket weaving, and they're like, all right, good enough. Like, I don't know exactly how that prepared me for like some of these jobs, but as far as they're concerned, check off that box, you're good. So I know in like my career, for example, if like somebody's applying, they just ask them, do you have a bachelor's degree or better? If you have it in the preferred, like, you know, in a medical field or something like that, then that's better. But if you don't, they're like, okay, you know, can you do the
yeah,
job? Yeah. I mean, they would take somebody who's really good without a bachelor's degree and cast them aside for somebody who's kind of good, but they have a bachelor's degree.
I mean, I will say with teaching, because I didn't have a teaching degree when I started teaching. And actually, right now, there's a teacher shortage nationwide. And in California, where I live, it's really, really, really bad. And right now, I don't have a classroom with kids. Like I said, I'm a literacy specialist, so I work with various teachers around anything to do with language arts instruction. And so anytime we need a sub and they can't get one, guess who
That's
gets
you.
me?
So with the immersion, really quick, because I don't know if I just was misunderstanding or I didn't catch it. So they start out younger with more Spanish, and then they kind of even out by fourth or fifth grade on half and half. Are those kids already like speaking Spanish and they're learning English, or is it English speakers being thrown in saying, okay, you're going to learn Spanish as you go?
So ideally, it's a 50-50 mix.
Oh, that's what
And
you said. Okay,
the kids, they really don't let, they don't let, I was laughing at Ryan's comment. You're not supposed to let kids enter the program after first grade unless they can prove language competency in both languages. Like I actually made my older child do this. And he did really well. I was nervous because he was in like a school district preschool and he cried every day up to like February. And preschool is like 1 adult to 8 kids. And I had already signed him up for transitional kindergarten and it was immersion. And I was like, oh man, this is 1 teacher and 26 kids and it's in another language. And what am I doing to my poor child? And he loved it. He did the first day. Like I still have his picture from like the first day of school. And he looks like so tired because it is mentally exhausting. The teacher never speaks English to you.
Right.
Ever. So he did it for transitional kindergarten, and first grade. And then we moved down here and the district where we live doesn't have it. And I was so bummed. Although he was like, hey, school's in English now. This is nice.
Yeah.
So.
I actually put my daughter in it was a preschool like that. And it was 100% Spanish. And she did it for several months. I think it was like 3 or 4 months. And then the lady stopped doing it. But at first she came home and she was just like, I don't know what they're saying. And she was so upset. But after a while, she was like, I can understand what they're saying, but I can't speak it, right? She could understand when she was given directions and stuff, but she wasn't able to speak it. But it was pretty interesting. Within just a few short months, she had really started to understand what was going on. But then the lady stopped doing it. But
you know what? If she, with like language acquisition, if your daughter ever tries to learn Spanish in the future, it'll be so much easier for her because she heard it at a young age. Whether or not she realizes that, it'll be much easier for her.
Well, cool. I'll let her know that.
Nice. Now you've moved around a little bit. You're back in Southern California. Were you moving around as part of your prior marriage, or were you like just kind of a mover and a shaker? Like why so many moves?
No, not actually that much moving. So I feel blessed that I got to stay in the same house, ward, city school from birth through when I graduated high school. And then I moved to Provo for college. I went to BYU for my undergrad. That was a culture shock. Also, I have 6 brothers and 1 sister, but she's like the second child and I'm the 7th.
Mhm.
So she was gone by the time I was 5. And when I went to BYU, I lived in the apartment dorms, like heritage halls, I think. That was the first time I lived with other women. And there were 6 of us. And I was like, what is this? Anyway, I survived.
Was it just a lot of drama, or what was the culture shock?
A lot of drama. I never realized how much toilet paper girls go through. Just a lot of like, yeah, just girls. Like, I did not grow up around girls. So I wish it was pajama pillow fights every night, Ryan. I had a roommate my freshman year who was like really actively loved mooning people and like getting you with her bare butt. And I was like, this is, who are you, strange female creatures?
Yeah. That's a weird way of trying to fit in, is showing your bare butt to the world.
Yeah.
But that would make you popular with certain circles, I guess.
I don't know. It was interesting. I almost did not go back after my freshman year, but I moved into another apartment full of people that I did not know. And it was really good. I was very blessed with amazing roommates from that point on. So when I moved from Southern California to Utah, that was for school. And then when I was in Chicago area, that was for my mission. And then when I was in Spain, that was still kind of school. It was study abroad. I did, and I was actually, so after I graduated, I moved to Long Beach, California, so like beach cities. I'm from a little bit inland. And I was actually looking for work in Spain because I would totally live abroad, like 100%. I would do it. And then,
is it because you like those Spanish guys? Is that it?
oh,
Like
yeah.
they're hot, sexy. So that'll kind of segue into our topic a little later tonight. But I don't know how many.
No, I'm not blonde enough for them to be super into me.
Is it kind of like Japan or something where they just love like you're kind of different, like red hair? I know I have a guy who used to be in my ward and his daughter was redheaded, and they would be in the military. And every time he went over there, he's like, dude, she just gets mauled. It's just crazy. So, same in Spain. I don't know. I've never been there. So
it's, there's a weird obsession with skin color over there because Spain for 700, it was either 700 or 800 years was under Moorish control. So like Arabic control. And so, like it's an insult to say like que moro to somebody means like, oh, how like you're how Moorish literally, but it's kind of like dark and
that's where Morocco gets its name. Morocco is Moorish.
Yeah.
So they came from the south across Gibraltar and
and I mean it's amazing. The cultural things that they left are amazing, but it's so this group from BYU, like there were a few girls with blonde hair and there were a couple girls who had like brown hair but blue eyes, and everywhere they would go, people would be like, oh, your eyes are so beautiful. So anyway, I don't have blonde hair and I don't have blue eyes. So
when I was on my mission there, my hair was blonder and the girls would yell, hey, Rubio, like blondie, blonde boy. Yeah, it was fun. And I couldn't do a darn thing about it. So I just wave and be polite,
Pass out a business card and be like, call me in 18 months or something.
There you go. Yeah. So then was in Long Beach. And then when I met the guy who is now my ex-husband, he was in the Bay Area, but had lived in LA. And so we were kind of like back and forth. And I found a job up there first. So that's why I lived up in the Bay Area. And I lived there for 11 years. And then we separated at 9 years, and I lived with the kids. I mean, we were like 3/4 of a mile away from each other. So they saw their dad, but I had them all the time. And I did that for like a year and a half or 2 years. And I was like, I'm really struggling and I could use some help. And so I checked with my parents. So again, I have a very big family. There's 8 kids in my family, and my parents still live in the huge house where we all grew up. And so I said, could I pay you rent and the boys and I will live in the upstairs of your house? And so that's what we've been doing. I'm very ready to move out, but I can't right now because
you can do sign language, and that way they can't hear you.
they're awesome and they're so wonderful, and it's such a blessing. But they've been remodeling downstairs, and so they have moved upstairs, and that's just too much. Like,
Now
Yeah.
you guys are all on top of each other, basically.
been 4 months, and I'm like, I love you, but
We're starting to organize a Flameless Fireside detail where we can come and rescue people from difficult situations. So we'll try to get our Southern California team coordinated, and if you
There
need
you
us
go.
to come
I mean-
kidnap you, we'll.
they're fine. And
And we're good with kids too, so
God willing,
bring them along.
the next month, the renovation will be done and they'll be back downstairs, which will be fabulous. But it's also just the market right now is, everybody knows, like the housing market is so insane. So
It's crazy right now. Yeah.
I'm just telling
Every-
myself to be patient and keep saving up, add to my down payment, and then when it gets better, off I go somewhere. I don't know where. I'm not tied to my current
You know,
location.
Dallas is a great place. Just saying.
You were just saying like how hot and humid it is there.
So tell me again, where does your ex live? The kid's dad.
He continued to live in the Bay Area for about another year or 2 years after we moved down here.
Okay.
And then last Thanksgiving, he decided to move to Draper, Utah. So
He doesn't see them a whole lot then, and he's not like a every weekend type dad or every weekend.
No. When he lived here in the Bay Area, I made sure to get the boys up to him at least once a month. But now it's more like every 2 or 3 months. We're going to Utah next weekend. So if you live in Utah, tell me what's going on.
Utah the following weekend. That's a bummer.
So literally,
We'll have
like
to organize a
moving for you-
Flameless Fireside gathering.
Yeah. So moving for you, you don't have to take that into consideration. I think that's where I was kind of trying to go.
Right. No, I don't. And I am trying to figure out, like, I'm open to moving, but I really only want to move one time, at least until my kids graduate high school. My older son, he's going to be in 5th grade next year. I'd really rather move like before he gets into middle school. He's got a little social anxiety, or a lot. And so I'm like, I want to just move. And for my kids, I want to be settled in like one place. And I'm trying to figure out where that is. Their dad is trying to convince me that Utah is where it is, but I have a sister who is a teacher in Utah and a brother-in-law that's a teacher. And my former mother-in-law was a teacher and an assistant principal. And the stories that I hear,
I mean,
I'm
you
like,
have
nope.
like 55 kids in your class would be great.
I can't handle.
Well,
it's not
It's
even
just
that.
one of the
It's-
lowest paid.
Yeah.
It's the mixing of church and school and the personal attacks from parents on how you must be a horrible member of the church if you're doing X, Y, or Z in the classroom.
Oh no.
So that kind of thing, I'm like, yeah, I don't.
That's tough.
I'm not convinced.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of stuff going on right now in classrooms where some of that maybe like have some merit, but some of that's pretty far out, I think probably other people get just way too. I don't live in Utah, so I know everybody talks about the culture there, and I can only imagine. So,
Everywhere else, it's just a mix. Some of the best people I know live here, and
Yep.
some of the craziest people.
it's
There's
wherever.
all kinds.
I
Yeah.
would say you probably don't have as crazy people as Portland, but I don't know. We got some pretty crazy people.
Well, that's not hard.
Yeah.
Where in Utah are you, John?
I'm in Logan.
Okay. Yeah,
So-
you're a little bit away from like.
Yeah, I'm
Utah
away from
County.
the front, so I'm about. I mean, at the northern end of this valley is Idaho, so I'm pretty close to rural Idaho, and it's a lot more laid back up here. So I like it. I'm determined to stay here until I'm going to only move one more time, or I'm going to get twinkled when Jesus comes. That's the only reason I'm leaving.
You got a
So
plan. That's awesome. I actually
one to
enjoy
two.
I mean, the culture's a little challenging at times, but I agree with John. There's a lot of great people there. But you know what? I've had my kids in school systems like Seattle was difficult for me because of the different types of teaching and things there. So I think it depends on the culture you would like, and then the culture you want your kids in. So yeah, it's an important thing for you to find something that matches your view with what you want your kids taught. So
Yeah. I mean, but hey, for whoever out there wants to know this, I was previously kind of seeing a guy in New York State. So I don't know how much far. I guess I could have been like seeing somebody in Maine. That would have been farther. But yeah.
So I mean, this
Is far.
This poses another question. You know, you're considering moving, you've got your kids, and you said your oldest son is in 5th grade. Is that right?
He's in 4th grade.
Oh, 4th grade. Okay. So what are the range of the age of your kids?
They are 6.5 and 9.5.
6.5, 9.5. Okay. So as far as having like their father in their life, clearly he's not there very often. Has your dad kind of, now that you're living with your parents, has he kind of filled that role?
My dad that's one of the biggest reasons why I moved down here.
yeah.
I will also say this for any of the men listening. This seems to be some weird common thing that you run into, and I don't get it. But I was just recently at a game night with probably 6 guys, and I think there was only one other woman there. And somebody was saying like, oh, well, it's because women always go for the bad boy. And I said, no. 0 interest in a bad boy. 0 interest in a nice guy. I was like, nope, not at all. And he kind of quizzed me. And he, after asking me a bunch of questions, he's like, okay, you're the second woman I've met that actually like means it when you say you don't want a bad boy. I was like, I want a good man. I was married to a nice guy. He's a nice guy, but he's not a good man. I don't want a nice guy. I don't want a bad boy. I want a good man. And I mean, like, are you dependable? Are you loyal? Do you have integrity? Do you have a good work ethic? Like all these things that I guess maybe they're boring, but bring that on. So yes, absolutely. My dad, that's what I want for my boys. And that's like my biggest deciding factor on where I go. Because I want them to be in the best environment and wherever that is, whatever geographical location that is, for them to have the experiences that will and the influences in their lives that will help them to become good, godly men. Mm-hmm. That's what I want. And my dad has been amazing.
So is that going to be difficult for them then when you move away if they don't have that transition into another positive male figure in their life?
Well, it could be. And like, I might stay here.
I know it's not ideal having your parents like on top of you practically, right? So
I do love my parents. They're actually really hands off. Although I will say, one time I was saying that, and typically like they don't even come upstairs in the house. And I was telling somebody that, and then like that night, like my mom just like walked in. It was super random. But we have this. So my parents are almost 80. They're both retired. They're not convinced they're going to stay here. And so they're kind of like, we do this back and forth thing where I'm like, you guys need to decide where you want to be. Like, are you really going to move? My dad's from Utah. My mom's from Montana. So they don't like, how liberal California is and how expensive it is. So they talk a lot about maybe moving like to Utah or Idaho or whatever. And I'm like, you guys got to decide where you're going to go, because to be honest, it's the end of your life. I don't want to be morbid, but I want you to be happy until you die. So you need to pick. And then they
figure it out.
And then like a few months will pass, and then like my mom will be talking to me and she'll say, no, we want you to decide where you want to be and where you're going, and then we'll just follow you. And I'm like, and we keep doing this back and forth. So they may go somewhere and I may go with them. I may go do my own thing. I wouldn't do it unless I really felt strongly that that was best for my boys. I have 2 brothers that live in the Atlanta area. Maybe I'll move there. I don't know. In Utah, my sister and her husband lived there, and my former sister-in-law and her husband are amazing. So, I mean, there are people, I don't have a perfect answer, but it is something that I do think about. Yeah.
Maybe at least one of you could talk to Jesus about it, and just.
Oh, I'm sure there's lots of talking
Maybe.
to Jesus going on.
Maybe.
That's probably true. I'm just throwing it out there. Maybe he knows, Although then he'd probably say, "Oh yeah, go to Cody, Wyoming, and everything will work out." And you'd be like, "Oh, okay, that trial of my faith, right?"
Well, I
don't
was
know.
going to tell you.
There's always
Wyoming's
Spain.
beautiful, I'm sure, in a way. Probably cold though.
I think I'm talking over everybody. I was just going to tell you, Vanessa, that I was raised by a single mom, and my father wasn't in my life, but my mom lived in a duplex next to my grandparents. And so until I was 12, my grandpa was kind of like my father figure. So even though, I still have aspects of my life that are affected by not having a father, I believe him being there up until I was 12, just that constant male figure was definitely a benefit to me. So kudos to you for doing that for your kids, because
that matters.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a little surprised your ex isn't trying to kind of convince you a little more, other than saying, "Hey, Utah's a great place." Like, if it were me, I'd be where my kids are. That's just how it is. If you move to Antarctica, then I would be like, all right, I guess I'm going to be like a penguin spotter or something. I don't even know if that's a job, but whatever I could find down in Antarctica, I would do it. Right.
Good old penguin spotter.
That's my job.
I hear they pay well. That's my, yeah.
I actually have a degree in penguin spotting.
Them, right?
Oh yeah. At least a class in that.
Yeah. No. I've definitely got a master's in that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Holy moly.
Yep. Yep. I agree with you, Everett. I was somewhat surprised when he very suddenly found a job in Utah and moved there. So
was there a girl involved by chance, or was this?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
I don't think so.
Is it a type of job?
Sometimes you got to do what you got to do too.
Yeah, and his mom lives there, and so maybe that played into it. Maybe he wanted some support. I don't know.
Does he have limited career options with his job? Is it sort of like I kind of take what I can get sort of thing? Or, you're a teacher, so obviously that's a little more flexible, but.
Yeah, he's a graphic designer.
Okay.
So he can kind of work anywhere. When we were in the Bay Area, he was working with event design and environmental design. So that's like signage and big, large format stuff. And he said that he applied at places in the Bay Area and down here and in Utah, and the one that offered him a job was in Utah. So,
wow. Well, I don't know. Being a child, quote, abandoned by their father, I'm not a fan of that. I understand people have to do what they got to do, but I don't know. It's just hard for me to swallow. So
yeah, I don't blame you.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay. Were you guys married in the temple when you got married? Okay. So your kids are sealed to you. That's all good. That's great.
I should have been like, what? They're not?
What do you mean?
Well, I have run into people before that they didn't get married in the temple, and that's a big concern of theirs. So I know at least a couple of women that they have full custody of their kids, and they're like, I don't know how to I don't think you can just go in and be sealed just to your kids.
No.
And so that was a struggle for them. So anyways.
No, it's true, because I'm not sealed to my mom. So that means I would love to be, but she's not married. And so it's just not possible right now. So
Yeah. So it's a huge blessing, you know, even if the marriage doesn't work out, to still have that ceiling there. I know there's a lot of people who really want that, who for various reasons just can't. Um, as far as the church goes, still active. I mean, is that something with the kids in their life that they're like, that's important? Or are they kind of like, well, I don't know, going their own way, or they're still young. So I guess.
Well, I'm still fully active.
Okay.
Have been the whole time. He is not. He has not been for several years. But he is supportive. So
That's good. Good. Well, so you have that then. Okay. At least you've got something where the kids have a good direction and someone who's going to support that direction. I mean, we've run into a lot of parents who they're active, they're trying to keep their kids in church. The parent left the church and is trying to pull the kids away from the church. And that happens quite a bit, unfortunately. So, okay. So I want to transition a little bit into tonight's topic, which is how to not date jerks, right?
How to avoid falling in love with a jerk.
that's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
that works too. I mean, I think
You don't want to be
always
falling in
start
love
with
with
that first date, but
them.
tell me a little bit about this topic for you. How does this relate to you, like in your kind of life? Because usually we try and gear the topic towards something that you choose.
Yeah. So the big one is that I think I was watching another one of these and I mentioned the book and I'm pretty passionate about it. So that's kind of, I was like, there's a little bit of interest, so I'll share that. But funnily enough, what happened, my introduction to this book, I don't remember how I first found it, but when I first started reading it, I never do audiobooks because I'm a visual learner and I don't like being read to. But when I was separated and when the boys and I moved to Southern California and I would take them up to meet with their dad once a month, it was a 6-hour drive round trip. So I checked out the audiobook and I would listen to this when I was driving to go get my kids to their dad and on the way back. So I've listened to the book several times and I've read it a couple times. And it just has so much great information. And I know that I would hope that it's not a large segment of potential readers, but I know there's a group of potential readers who won't even look at it because they're turned off by the title.
So maybe one of the things we should do before we start is kind of define like, what is a jerk, right? Because that's going to be different for just about everybody. I mean, there's probably going to be some similar characteristics, but some people might say like, well, he's a jerk if he does X, Y, or Z. And another will be like, oh, I'm fine with that. But if they do this, then they're a jerk. Like what when you're kind of reading through this, what sticks out to you like, yes, that's a jerk?
I can tell you exactly what the author says.
Oh, there you
So
go.
he says,
okay, I want to know the author, but I also want to know your opinion too. So
what I think is a jerk, it's someone who's selfish and who they might be able to hide it for a while, but it's really about them more than about, we as a relationship.
okay, that's a fairly broad statement. I would say that happens a lot in marriage. And I would even go so far as to say we probably are all to some degree selfish at some point.
At some point, yeah, but I'm talking like consistently.
daily. Yeah.
All the
Chronically
time.
selfish.
Okay.
Like that's who you are, a defining characteristic.
Like it's all about me all the time.
And I kind of feel like, and I don't know, I haven't read the book, but I kind of feel like, in my opinion, like a jerk would be someone who's constantly trying to cut you down or like belittle you, versus trying to like build you up and lift you up. Like just like they feel like, again, everything's about them and not about you, and just kind of, the world revolves around.
Sounds like kind of like narcissism a little bit.
Yeah,
Could be. I don't like the term narcissism just because I feel like it's way overused. But yes.
very trendy these days.
Yeah.
Actually, so just from a therapist perspective, I actually think it's underused, and I'll tell you why. narcissism doesn't refer to NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. That's overused because I would say people who fit the criteria for that may only represent 3 to 5% of the population, but narcissism is rampant in society. Does it always rise to the level of NPD? No, but that doesn't mean it doesn't do damage. And so all of us are narcissistic to one degree or another, meaning we look out for ourselves and sometimes above others, especially if we're rude or anything like that. But yeah, I'm not too bothered by the word narcissism. I just, when we use that to refer to NPD, that's definitely overused for sure. So, but there's other ways. I think you could just as easily use words like toxic or controlling or, manipulative or, there's all kinds of different words that you can use that would adequately describe it. So,
yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
Anyway.
So we'll go back to the author's definition of a jerk. So,
would you like to hear what that is?
Yes, of course. They're all
no,
like,
wait, hold on.
Drum roll.
So the author says that the most fundamental identifying feature of true jerks is their persistent resistance to ever changing their core jerk qualities. And the identifying features are a habit of breaking boundaries, like players or space invaders. What's yours is mine and what's mine is mine. An inability to see anything from anyone else's perspective and a dangerous lack of emotional controls and balances.
That almost sounds like a cluster B to me.
I was thinking that.
John?
Yeah, that is so cluster B.
Yeah.
And so borderlines would fit that, as well as histrionics and antisocials. Psychotic or not psychotic, antisocials would be more like, what's the word for it? Sociopath. So yeah, or a psychopath. Yeah, they're not fun to be around in any context.
So we know kind of what a jerk is now. And listening to that definition, it's like a given. Well, duh, we don't fall in love with someone like that. But we find ourselves in those situations anyway, right? So why is that?
Well, can I share my screen?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Hold on. Are you able to?
Yeah. You can do it.
Let me know if you're able to do it. If not,
it says you've disabled participant screen sharing.
Yeah, you need to make her a co-host. There you go.
Okay. There you go.
Okay. And if, like I said, I'm a professional development deliverer. So I probably have way more than I need here, but in talking about this book, just really quickly, Dr. Van Epp, this is like evidence-based. He's got several different programs that he's put together over years of clinical counseling. He's also worked as a pastor of a non-denominational church, and he reviews a lot and often references studies. So it's not just like, obviously it's his take on what he's reading, but it's not just like some person saying, this is what I think, so go with it. So I just want to get it out of the way. A lot of people really don't like the title. So it was published in 2006. I was in a different mid-singles book study group, and we actually had Dr. Van Epp come join us. So he said this, he was trying to come up with a catchy title, and he was like, I'm writing this book about not marrying people who are just self-centered and mean and unconscientious. And his colleague said, like a jerk. Mm-hmm. And so that's how he came up with it. And it, really stood out at the time from all the other similar books in this genre. And so the title is well known now. And even though he's like, I know there's some people who won't approach the book because of the title, but my publisher won't let me change it. So
what's interesting? I don't see the issue with the title. When you're writing a book, you want a catchy title. You want something where whoa, what's that? You don't want something just kind of bland. No one's going to look.
I think some people, I'm not sure because I didn't have a problem with this, but I
don't
think
either.
men might have issues because they think that it is talking only about men.
Oh, okay.
So Dr. Van Epp, he'll say a jerk or a jerkette because,
Oh,
he's like, it's not just men. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. So
okay.
the
I'll be
book
honest,
has,
like when I first heard it, that was kind of, it just comes to mind. Like you're thinking this is about guys, you know?
Yeah, I
Mhm,
can kind of see that.
but
Yeah.
I
it's
can
not.
see how that would be.
So the book has 3 parts, kind of an overview introduction. And he says your heart matters, but so does your head. Part 2 is using your head, and part 3 is follow your heart. And so he's really just trying to talk about a balance between the two. So in the first part, there's 3 chapters, and these are the chapter titles: Follow Your Heart Without Losing Your Mind, The RAM Plan, and I'll explain what that is in a second, and that healthy people make healthy choices. So basically, when he's talking about follow your heart without losing your mind, love is blind, right? We hear that phrase, but there's a problem with that. So first, most people lack the knowledge, he says head knowledge of what to look for in a prospective partner. And then second, if you're too much in love, your overdeveloped emotional attachment severs your cognition from your emotions. And again, in the book, he references studies, but this is why the problems. And so he says, love thinks, and that's actually his website now is lovethinks.com. And it is possible to combine the resources of your mind and the passions of your heart. And that's what the whole book is about. Like, he's not saying to be overly intellectual or overly emotional. He really wants you to have a balance of the two to stay safe emotionally. So this is where I was talking about what is a jerk. And generally, when it talks about a lack of emotional controls and balances, that's either going to be someone who is immature, and emotionally turbulent, or they're emotionally flat and unresponsive. And typically, these individuals, jerks or jerkettes, have their best showing in the first few months or the first initial stages of a relationship.
Can I interject something here as well, since we're on this? It just, when I see this slide, one of the things that comes to mind to me is just almost like the culture we live in now, right? Like you listen to rap music and the songs or whatever, and I don't want to just call out specifically rap, but a lot of what our culture is based around these things, right? Being a player and just going out and being all for yourself, and oh, it's about money and doing all these things. And it's almost like this just grooming of society to become this type of person that you want to avoid. And it's glorified, and it's like,
well, and then you got social media and Hollywood, and they have award shows for every art form, and it's just all about look at me, that kind of mentality, and that rubs off on us, and it both turns us on and off, in some ways. Because I'm noticing on this list, it's not just that they're over into you. Sometimes it's that they just can't get into you. They're aloof emotionally, and they set you up to chase them almost too much. There's not a balance. I was just going to mention, I was thinking to myself, how do jerks get us to be attracted to them, and jerkettes? And I thought of animals that are predators, but they have some kind of camouflage or something attractive that lures you in, kind of like a Venus flytrap, where it looks so inviting and the fly goes in, and it's like, oh, look, there's dew on the, and yummy, I'm going to get to eat, and then snap. Or those fish at the bottom of the sea with the tongue that looks like a worm, or, maybe it's birds with certain colored feathers, and I do know with people who are really toxic, they'll be really, smooth talkers, or they'll be very sexually attractive, or they'll be really funny, or they'll have a lot of money, or, and so they have a lot of these things where we're like, wow, that'd be so cool if I could get to know that person. And it's almost like idolatry in a way. We got to be really careful about that we don't overemphasize things that don't matter at first. So
yeah, well, and that's what this whole book is about.
Right.
And he you said something and now my mind, I just lost it. I'll probably come back in a second. But he asks, like, can love be defined? Oh, I remember what I was going to say. In the book, why you should still read this book or check it out. It's very well known and it's probably in your local public library. He gives lots of examples from his clinical practice. And so you can see like how this plays out and be like, oh yeah, that was me in this one relationship or at this point. So it's very readable. It's not a dry book. So the RAM, which is the relationship attachment model, which is this kind of equalizer looking thing, it summarizes and categorizes from research the forces that contribute to the feelings of closeness and love. And the balance of all 5 bonding dynamics, so knowing someone, trusting them, relying on them, committing, and touch, the balance determines the healthiness of your relationship and the clarity of your perspective on your partner. And he really talks about safe relationships, and in a safe relationship where like it's safe for you to emotionally invest yourself, you never go further in one bonding area than you've gone in the previous. And that's why these are all lower than the preceding one. And so what happens a lot of the time is, you'll know somebody relatively well, you trust them a ton because you feel like you know them. And then depending on how physical you are, you may be like really physically involved with them and it's out of balance. So that would be like out of the safe zone. And so he says when it's out of balance, that emotional bond is unhealthy. And then because our emotions are controlling our brain, and there's literally like endorphins and all kinds of chemistry going on in your body that make you or tend to lead you to behave or think a certain way, that can cause you to overlook crucial characteristics of the other person that should be exposed and explored. So he's just saying if you follow this safe zone rule, then your relationship will grow in a healthy and a stable way.
So they have these laid out right there in order. So you need to know them, then trust them, then rely, then get a commitment of sorts before there's excessive touching. Like it's like in a line.
Yeah.
We see that in couples work where like I have a saying that I tell my couples, and it's what the mind begins, the heart must complete. That we start with logic, does this person make sense? In this case, we're trying to use it to where they're overthinking how to heal their marriage and they don't have enough emotion to heal it. When we're getting into toxic relationships, we have too much emotion up front and not enough thinking. It's like flipped, and then once you're in the relationship, that's when you should feel first, and like really try to get it to a deeper level. But yeah, I love the order that he has those in, because it start with your mind, kind of check off, do we agree intellectually, and then don't start getting the emotions involved until we're already, kind of convinced in our heads, I guess.
And he talks about, I have a couple of things that I wrote down from the book because I just was like, oh yeah, that's the way he says it. I love. He said, romantic love suppresses the neural activity associated with your ability to judge correctly, to correctly judge a partner about whom you have negative feelings. So if you're feeling like, no, I don't know about this, but you're like in the rush of love, it's like messing with, again, your thought processes. And then in a dating relationship, the stronger your feelings of affinity and loyalty, the more likely you will overlook the shortcomings and failures of a potential partner. So that's problematic, right?
Right.
Chapter 2 is that healthy people make healthy choices. And so he says, the first step in building a healthy relationship is to be the best person that you can be. And he talks about the 4 things required to change, and that's insight into yourself, new information to direct the changes, motivation, and time. And I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time on this, but I will share this with anybody who wants it.
You can keep going. We've got plenty of time. So
he says that if you have unhealthy emotional needs, that can lead you to develop one of 3 relationship patterns. And that these patterns, you're trying to fix something interpersonally that can only be really resolved intrapersonally, like on your own. Like being with someone else is not going to fix that. And so those 3 patterns are idealization, when you just don't see anything wrong with them. They're like your perfect vision. And identification, when it's someone who's totally opposite from you. And incarnation, what it talks about repetition compulsion, which is when you just repeat the same sort of thing again and again. And then just some important points, like a relationship does not change a person. That person changes him or herself. And resolving your emotional necessities is the first step in avoiding marriage to a jerk. And so it's also indispensable so that you avoid becoming the jerk or jerkette in your marriage. So you got to start with yourself.
That too, you'll see people who are in prolonged relationships with jerks, that jerkiness will rub off, you know. It might rub off in a different way though. It might be, you know, for example, if the jerk's really controlling, it might rub off to where they're really avoidant, you know, they're really kind of like, don't want to touch, don't want to get close, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or the other way around. But either one, it's toxic, you know.
Yeah.
Those extremes are toxic.
Yeah, when I first separated, I mean, it probably took me at least 3 years, if not longer, before I started to feel normal. Kind of like myself again.
Yeah. Like it took me like 4.5 years of counseling to really like even just kind of recognize myself again, because there was so much that I'd put up so many different walls and ways to cope with the crap that was coming at me that I had to learn how to just like get rid of all that and just almost restart again.
Yeah.
It's hard to do.
Yeah. And something I was just going to say something that's interesting from the book on this point. He states that the best time of life to do this is typically between about age 18 to age 25, when you become an adult and you kind of ordinarily go out on your own. And he says that's the best time to work on this and to get yourself healthy, because you're on your own for that first time. So like to not jump into a relationship. And I kind of think about how many people in the church get married young. Not that that's a bad thing, but it's just like, it's just interesting.
In a way, that's one of the advantages of missions, if you think about it.
Yes.
And that doesn't guarantee that everybody that goes on a mission, that's the myth that, you know, hey, if you go on a mission, you're going to be great. I think if you go on a mission, you're going to be a better than you would have been, you know, unless you go for the wrong reasons and you don't really live the mission, you know. Right. But I think most of the time it makes us better and gives us at least a better chance at sort of creating better relationships after.
Yeah.
Living with companions is definitely good prep.
Yeah. So. And being able to see into so many different families and their home life.
Right.
Also good.
You know,
Everett, were you wanting to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that's great when you're younger. When you get to our age and you're in that moment of, you know, I'm just getting divorced or something's happened. How many times have we seen somebody who's just like, I have a void and now I need to fill it? And that is prime real estate for somebody like this to step in and say like, okay, fresh meat, right?
Yep. Yep, exactly.
I think that's why there's a lot of second, you know, divorces, to be honest.
Second.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, the high divorce rate in subsequent
second marriage.
Yeah. So then the second part of the book, which is called Use Your Head, these are the chapters. This part of the book is all about getting to know someone. So it's, hello, I love you. Won't you tell me your name? Find your soulmate. Say what you mean and mean what you say. And my third wife was or my third husband, if we want to have gender equality. You can't marry Jethro without getting the clampets and find your mate's soul. So this book, like part 1, I don't think I have my actual physical book with me.
Man, I would marry Ellie Mae in a heartbeat just because it would be like a comedy show every day, man. That would be a blast.
But
at least for a while, I guess.
So on the RAM, the relationship attachment model, there's 5 areas, but really he's spending a third of the book just on getting to know someone. So it's really important, obviously. And so talking about that, this section I probably have the most information on. And so this is the first dynamic of knowing someone, and do I really know you? And people tend to think that their bonds develop like later on in a relationship, but they actually start forming in the getting to know you phases of a relationship. And I really loved what he said about getting to know someone. So he said, to know, like, that's the cardinal bonding dynamic, and everything flows from knowing someone. And historically, it was a synonym for intimacy. So if you think about, like in the Bible, and Adam knew Eve. So I love this. The idea of knowing another is an experience of the mind, heart, and body, something much greater than just a meeting of the minds. And so we've confused the ideas of knowing about someone with truly knowing that person, which is why he goes so into depth.
Or we go too quickly to one aspect of knowing, like the emotional side of knowing, without first exploring, what it is to just really know them at an intellectual level.
Yes.
Well, and how many times have we run into that? I mean, Celeste, you've had, people who are like, I'm absolutely sure you're the one. And you're like, you don't even know my kids' names, right? Like, you don't know me.
Absolutely.
And
yeah. I've had
people jump that ship so quick, and they're just convinced, like, I've had revelation. This is where I'm supposed to go. But
gosh.
Or that intimacy talk, right? Some guys jump on the ship really quick with that. And that's embarrassing. Just
hey, I'm going to tell you, man, that toxicity in women is very sexual, so they can go there quickly too. And that, I think whether a man or a woman goes there, first date and that kind of thing, that's red flag stuff.
So Dr. Van Epp says there are no shortcuts for getting to know someone. And he talks about the no-quo, which is intimacy is talk or mutual self-disclosure, togetherness, which is diversified experiences, and time. And you got to balance what you know about them from what they say and what they do. And so you want to look at various sources of information. The situational domain is the way they act in different situations. And the relational domain is the way they treat you throughout the course of the relationship. And you want to really pay attention to the inconsistencies between the two, how they act in different situations and how they treat you. And
that behavior is critical.
Yeah.
That they back it up.
Right.
Especially in difficult circumstances, because whenever life gets stressful, it pushes us to our dark side. And you want to see, where does that dark side go? And, sometimes that just takes time to be in situations where you can see them.
Yes. So he says that the situational information often has a stronger predictive power than what you experience in the relational domain. I think that my child is picking the lock on the door and he's about to come in.
That's okay. We can have John explain a little more while you figure it out.
I know.
He'll give us some back.
Well, here's the thing. What I love about this, and I have read this book, by the way, it's just been a while, but I'm getting a good refresher. What it's really talking about is it's almost like this guy is saying, I want you to bond really well with whoever you marry. And, you know, for that to happen, you got to go about it a certain way. And the research really does show that, you know, in a marriage, you start emotional to heal things, good kind of emotion. But when you're getting to know someone, you start from kind of that intellectual side and you move deeper and deeper as you go. And I just think it's a really healthy way of, and it also tends to weed out that 5 to 10% of really toxic people.
Yeah.
You know, because they are not going to like this. I'm telling you right now, they will get impatient. They will feel like you don't love them. They will, you know, struggle with it in many ways. And that, you know, you should look at that as a sign that, you know, at least we need to slow down, but maybe we need to call it off. And I'd rather do that before we've made out and a bunch of times, and I feel like, wow, she's really amazing that way. I don't want to know that, like, if it's something that is toxic, and because that's not going to help you out of every circumstance once you've made that commitment and you're married. So
yep, I agree. This is Dr. Van Epps' dating disclaimer, and I love this. The good doesn't always last, and the bad usually gets worse. So when you're dating someone, don't ever expect them to be more or different or better, because you're pretty much seeing the best. They're putting their best foot forward. And the longer you know them, the better, the more true picture you'll have of who they are. And this was kind of what John was mentioning. Like Dr. Van Epp discusses the 4 depths of openness and communication. So you start up here at observation and facts, and then you move into perspectives and opinions. And then you go into experiences and emotions. And then after all of that, and after they're reciprocating at the same levels, then you get into needs and relationship responses. And so you just want to match your openness to what you see in the other person. Watch out for too much too soon. And you just want to pace yourself.
Those things are going to blend, you know, there's going to be a little of it, all of that in every aspect, in every stage of the relationship. It's just, I think you're emphasizing those things in order, knowing that a little of the other might creep in. It's not like we can totally isolate that one topic, but yeah. And
he just says, like, pace yourself. Like, don't open up the deepest recesses of your heart to someone that you don't really know, because they don't truly care. So just be careful with how you go about this.
That's like those embarrassing fast and testimony meetings where people just get up there and like tell everything, and you're just wanting to crawl under your chair. Like, that's embarrassing. So there's kind of a level of.
I notice it in dating with the first date bishop's interview, or the first date interrogation, I want to call it. And it's just like, you know, I do not need to know if you're hot in bed on the first date. I don't need to know if you're a porn addict on the first date. I just want to know, can we just even have a nice conversation and have fun together? You know, there are no rings on fingers right now. We're just having fun. And like it says, go down that list. I mean, you know, as you start to get emotionally close, okay, we're going to have deeper conversations about some of this stuff.
Yep.
You know, but I think I love the pacing, you know, of it, you know.
Yeah. And he just says over and over in different ways throughout the book, there's no shortcuts. You have to put the time in. And again, how long does it take? He says, you cannot rush intimacy. And I know people hate this. And I know there's probably someone here who's like, well, I have this friend who, of course, there are always the exceptions. But the suggestion is 3-month rule, that it takes 3 months for many subtle but serious patterns to begin to surface. So you're not going to see that until after 3 months. And you want to keep everything in check. So on that RAM, that like equalizer, you want to keep all those things low for the first 3 months, because you want to make sure you have that safe zone going.
Yeah, they were saying earlier in the conversation that that's maybe one of the advantages of long distance dating.
Yeah.
You know, we just, Yeah,
You're
we
kind
can't
of
really,
forced into it.
you put your hand, touch the screen. But other than that, yeah, it's kind of like, I guess we're just chatting,
And I guess there was another book. I'm sorry, Vanessa, did I cut you off?
Oh, I was just going to say the difficulty, because having been there, when you get to, like, yes, that's true of long distance dating, but then when you do get together, you kind of want to like make the most of your time, or maybe that's just me.
Oh, that's true.
It's got pluses and minuses, that's for sure.
Well, especially if the conversation during those 3 months is going super well, like you're developing that connection the right way. It's kind of like when you actually show up in person, it's like Katie bar the door, like, oh my gosh, look at you, you're here. But I think we can know that about ourselves, and I would hope we can hold it together
or learn it about ourselves.
Right.
Moving on.
Develop it within ourselves.
Yes.
So I was going to point out, I don't know which book or what this was stated, but I know in past podcasts they've talked about how people who are in that cluster B area, they can actually go as long as almost 9 months without kind of breaking and showing the real them. So sometimes they can hide it for up to 9 months, but I guess at that point it's hard to get past that 9 months, but there are cases when it can go that long. So just be careful out there.
So, I mean, the patterns, like he even says, they might start to become evident after 3 months. So you definitely got to keep your eyes open.
What I was going to say on that is, like, I think they can go 9 months if you're breaking some of those rules early, meaning that you're allowing it to go too. That'll appease them and may make it, they can last a little longer because you are kind of indulging them, in some of the manipulative stuff they're trying to do. I think if you really hold it tight for those 3 months and you're just really focused on a really healthy development of the relationship, I think they're going to be crawling in their skin. I've just met too many of them in therapy, and I just think they're going to crawl. That's a very fragile ego in there. Yeah. And that's going to be rough. So, but there are some, I think, that are pretty good at masking it for months on end. And I've even seen some where it's, over a year, where they really have the other person convinced. And so, don't beat yourself up if you marry one after doing everything right and they still turn out to go south on you. So.
Yeah. All we can do is the best we can.
So my question that I have then, and probably this is more for John, what prevents people from becoming this once they get into a marriage? I mean, maybe somebody doesn't start off down this road. They're not cluster B initially, but I mean, I sort of feel like this is not, like, people aren't immune to becoming this down the road and just turning completely selfish and turning into a jerk, Yeah.
Well, and that's where we got to distinguish between true NPDs or BPDs, borderlines, and PTSD. People who've really been hurt either growing up by maybe an abusive parent, or being in a really horrible first marriage, or in a horrible boyfriend-girlfriend situation in high school, or whatever it may be. That trauma, that can just create a big mess. And if they haven't healed from that, they can really show up in toxic ways, that sort of look like cluster B. I would say the major difference, though, with people in that situation is, one, they have a better chance of healing from it and overcoming it. And two, it doesn't tend to be like all the criteria, and as intense, you know what I mean? Like they might have moments of, empathy, for example, or moments where they're not exploiting other people, and, that kind of thing. So they're more in and out, and they can come completely out if they heal. But to heal, they're going to need,
they got to get in there and clean out those boxes that
you got to clean out that
do.
crap that they've been through. And that can't be you, the partner or spouse, doing that. I mean, I definitely think spouses can help, and boyfriends and girlfriends and family. But you can't be the primary source of that healing, basically. And so don't take that upon yourself and say, oh, if they're just loved well, they'll be okay. And it's like, one, if they are PD, no, that will not help them. In fact, that could actually make it worse, to be quite honest. They won't look at that as, oh, maybe I should be nice to them. They might look at it as, oh, look how weak they are. I'm going to exploit them even more. Like, seriously, it is that dark. If it's the PTSD kind, even that, they need to really find their way through that, and it would help to have support. I'm not even saying anybody has to be totally healed, because I don't know if any, especially at our age, I don't know if any of us is going to be totally healed when we remarry, but I do think we need to be in a place where we don't do these repeated toxic behaviors over and over again. So
yeah,
I guess what I'm saying is people are allowed to struggle. Like, I don't mind somebody I'm dating crying or saying I'm really having a hard time, or I don't know if I'm all the way healed yet, or that shows insight. That's actually hopeful to me. It's when they don't see what they're doing and they don't apologize and they're hurting people. You just got to run away from that.
Right.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is sort of where people start to fall into this category. Let's say they start having an affair, and you start noticing them pulling away and exhibiting these behaviors. That's kind of not necessarily a sign of NPD, but you're now in what John has been describing as somebody who is, they're not out of the realm of healing. That doesn't necessarily mean you stay in that relationship, though.
Right. Yeah, you don't have to. You can be supportive without being married to someone. Yeah. And you can also recognize that you being supportive doesn't matter, or may even make it worse. And that if you really want to support them, get the heck away from them, and leave that to someone else.
Yep.
Yep.
Sometimes you can be triggering them and you don't even mean to. So.
Right.
Yep.
All right, Vanessa, have at it again. We went down a little rabbit hole.
That's good. Okay. So chapter 5 is still in this whole the whole section about getting to know someone, and this one is getting to know your compatibility potential. So he says that compatibility is more than just similarity, and it consists of 3 dimensions, which is chemistry, complementarity, and comparability. So chemistry is not always a good judge of character, because it sees what it wants to see, and it's not constant, even in the best of relationships. Complementarity that's when you realize that you're becoming a better person by being with your partner. And so, he says time refines the blend of differences in mutually beneficial ways. And when partners become more alike over time, again, it takes time. And comparability, it says the 3 main areas you should compare with your partner are personal characteristics, values, and lifestyles. And he has this lists of questions, things to find out. And I have all of those. I typed them all up, and I will share those. It's just a Google Doc, so anybody can access it. Just things to think of. Chapter 6 is getting to know the skills for building and maintaining relationships. So relationship skills are the tools of your conscience. And you want to first know if your partner, how well they can self-disclose. So that's talking about themselves and sharing themselves. And you want to look for high congruence. So basically, is what they're saying and what they're doing true? And watch out if that's not the case, if they don't match. So that's
is that kind of like if you talk a good game, but then their actions don't back up, like they don't align with what they say?
Right. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
If they're yeah, exactly. They say one thing, but when you're watched, because this is why it's important to not just talk, but to also do things together.
Right.
And you can see how they behave in different situations and with different people. Like, it does what they say match up with what they really do.
Right. And that includes even, if they make mistakes, how do they recover? Or do they have the attitude, well, if you hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have done what I did. But I like people who are more, whatever you may have done, I don't like how I treated you, and I'm really sorry for that, and I need to correct that. And then you should see a follow-up to that being they stop doing that. Like they really don't tend to do that. Or if they do it again, they apologize almost immediately without you ever saying anything. Just say, you know what, I did that again, and I'm sorry. That's not okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can live with that. But yeah, when there's no insight, people have made comments too on the chat that, when they can't see it, or if they see it, they can't admit it. Yeah, that's a no-go.
Yeah. Yeah. And he says that a balanced relationship should have similar amounts of listening, talking, disclosing, and initiating between you and the other person. And good conflict resolution skills involve mutual assertiveness, mutual respect of views, humility, a willingness to forgive, and a resiliency to bounce back after the conflict is resolved, which is kind of like what you were just saying a little bit, John.
Yeah.
Then chapter 7 is getting to know patterns from other relationships. And so he talks about the theory of relationship continuity. And that's that there's similarity, connection, and overlap between the ways you act in your various relationships. So because history does repeat itself often, you want to pay attention to how you and your partner behaved in past relationships, as well as how others are now treated. And this is particularly important when a lot of us have been married and divorced. Like, how do you interact with and treat that ex-spouse? So your understanding of this continuity of relationship, that'll help you take the ways that your partner treats others and translate them into predictions for your own future. And so he talks about when he talks about relationship scripts, it's just how that person acted and continues if they continue to interact with someone in a past relationship. And so he talks about observing and talking about and getting to know how they act with peripheral others. So that would be like service people, or like the cashier at a grocery store, or a waiter or waitress. And then significant others, past romantic partners. So significant others would be like family or close friends, and then past romantic partners, and finally yourself. So it's like, how do they interact with people from, like, again, he calls them peripheral others. So people way out on the edges all the way up to you. You should be in a developing relationship, the closest person to them. And you want to see that because sooner or later, all of those are going to come into play in a marriage, because there's just different things happening all the time.
Okay, and so here's where I want to bring up something I mentioned earlier. So here's a little life hack to add to this. Don't just do this at an intellectual level. You've got to take it emotional, or it will not stick. And so not only do we need to ask ourselves, do they understand intellectually what happened in those previous relationships and the role they played in that? But also, do they feel it? Are they kind of like, my heart is unwilling to get wrapped up in that crap anymore. I am not willing to play that role, whether I was a pushover or a tyrant, whether I was controlling or acquiescing, like whatever extreme I went to when I was triggered, not only does my mind not wrap around that anymore, my heart cannot go there again. Mm-hmm. I want to be securely attached from now on. And I want to be with someone who can securely attach to me, none of this anxious avoidant, craziness.
That is some great advice right there.
Thanks.
So he says, pay attention to your partner's friends, because they often mirror qualities of your partner. And practice the Columbo technique, which is like, don't draw conclusions right away. You want to make sure that, the more you know, the better, and look at them from not just your own perspective, but others' perspectives, and then test your theories. And
we'll have to send out a scene from Columbo.
So people know.
I'll send a link to Celeste because I know she hasn't seen Columbo.
Hey, not everybody has seen Columbo. I'm just throwing that out there.
And then keep in mind that if you're dating someone with children, that involves consideration of more issues than just your relationship with the partner. Chapter 8. So this would be getting to know the patterns of a family background. And you want to explore those family experiences and pay close attention to the formation of roles in your partner's family structure, especially their relationship with their same-sex parent and the opposite-sex parent. And as I'm like flying, that was pretty much it. Like I said, he does have questions and things to consider, and I have those, and I'll share them at the end of this. And then chapter 9, which is finding your mate's soul, and he's talking about get to know the patterns of conscience. And so if you look through like these steps in getting to know someone, it goes from a surface level to very deep right here. So if you have good relationship skills but no conscience, you can be very manipulative. And this is kind of what we're talking about with some of those cluster B folks. Like they can do it, at least for a while.
They can be masters at it. Like they are just masters in disguise.
Yep.
They just seem like the most outgoing and fun and amazing. And they really are. It's not like they don't have those skills, but man, when the doors close and they go to their dark side, look out, everybody,
Yes.
It's gonna get ugly. And then you seem crazy if you don't want to be with them. Or if you think anything's wrong with them, not him, not her. They're amazing, and you're just like, oh, like what am I supposed to say,
Yep.
And I think you also notice how you are when you're around them, because one thing I've noticed when I'm around toxic people in any setting, I just become a really horrible version of myself. And it's just in ways that are just not natural for me, and then I feel like I'm to blame. Am I the one causing all the problems? But when I look back in hindsight, it's like sometimes yes, but many times that was more of a response to the toxicity, and then, but you got to know the difference. Be honest with yourself. Know when you're more of the source of the toxicity and when you're not, though. Don't beat yourself up when you're reacting to the toxicity in a toxic way. There's a difference. I mean, that's just you trying to defend yourself.
And it's interesting, if you have the book, like reading this chapter, at least for me, it was a good point for a lot of like introspection and to think about my own conscience and do like a consciousness check. Like, what's the state of it? So he points out there's two, like our conscience has two functions, basically. There's the monitoring conscience, and that like it's our own mind, like monitoring ourselves. Like, are we in line? Are our words and actions in line with our beliefs? And so this is evident in how we or our partner responds to feelings of guilt and admits to being wrong. And then the other one, and actually I'll come back to that in just a second, is the transporting conscience, the other function. And that transports you into your partner's perspective and prompts understanding and empathy. So those are the two functions, like to monitor and then to transport or put you in somebody else's shoes. So he says impulsivity could be a sign of a weak enforcing system. And you want to have an active conscience, but don't go overboard because that can lead to problems. And this one that I feel is very important. You want to resist the temptation to become your partner's conscience. Let them live by his or her own conscience and then decide if you like what you see. So,
So what would
and
that look like to you to be somebody else's conscience for them? I'm kind of trying to picture this a little bit.
me being the one that gets my husband to go to church, or me being the one that, I mean, it's sort of like personal examples, but we shouldn't do that because that isn't in alignment with our beliefs. As a parent, sure, you want to help someone with that, but as an adult, no.
So is that really being their conscience though, or is that just conflicting values?
I don't think it's the difference between your values or like your point of view. A lot of this has to do with how you go about it, not what. You're allowed to disagree, but I can disagree with somebody in a very healthy way, where I still value them as a person and I don't cut them down and I don't try to manipulate or control or gaslight or project or any of that stuff on them. But there are methods of toxicity where we can have the exact same disagreement and somebody is just, it's destroying, it's like soul crushing. And that's what you don't want. I don't need somebody that agrees with me on everything. But I do need someone who cares about me, whether they agree with me or not.
I think it's important for them to hear you and understand you, but they don't necessarily have to agree with you. And I think in society, we lack that. Like nowadays, like no one wants to hear what anyone else has to say. They just want to state their own truth and leave it at that. And I think that's a major issue just in society and relationships. So
yeah, that cancel culture is actually a huge sign of narcissism in an entire section of society.
Yes, it is, sadly.
So
yeah, to me, I guess, I think it's one thing to have disagreements. It's a completely different category when you have a different set of moral values. So for example, you're dating somebody, right? Because we're not necessarily married to this quote unquote jerk or this other person yet. We're still getting to know them. And you want to go to church, they don't. You want to live the gospel standards, they don't. I mean, those aren't just disagreements. Those are like different lifestyles. Do you know what I mean? So to me, I guess when they're saying don't put your moral values on somebody else or be their moral compass for them, I wouldn't necessarily want someone to say, okay, well, I'll go to church because you want that. Because just like going back a few, steps in this, that stuff wears off after a while, right? You get into that relationship and maybe it lasts 6 months, maybe it lasts 6 weeks, maybe it lasts 6 days. I don't know. But sooner or later, if they're not really committed to the gospel and they don't really care to go to church, just because they suddenly fell in love with you and they're following what you want because they're Twitter pated at that moment, that doesn't mean that's who they're going to be. Now, could it be? I mean, there is people who get converted like, okay, well, I started going back to church because I got in this relationship and that's fantastic. And I really just I found my testimony through them. Fantastic. But I think that's where giving this time really plays out to see if that's who they become or if that's who they're being at the moment for the relationship.
Yeah. You need to let them be who they are. And then you need to decide. You watch for the patterns and you give it time for those patterns to show themselves. And then you decide if you like that and can live with it or not.
Absolutely.
It's down to.
Yeah.
The final part of the book, he talks about following your heart. So it's sketching what he calls the date mate profile. Chapter 11 is if I scratch your back, will you scratch mine? 12 is my word is my bond, maybe. And 13, how to have great sex. So 10, this is
Well,
about
that's
trust.
worth the price of admission right there.
He leaves that for like the final chapter. It's like all right, you made it through the book. Here we go.
Yep. It probably will not be what most of you are thinking, but chapter 10 is all about trust. That's what this dynamic is. And so it is your trust profile of your partner and not actually your partner that generates your feelings of trust or mistrust. And so you want to stay again in the safe zone. So don't like trust them more than you actually know them, like really know them, which is why we just spent a whole bunch of time talking about the varying depths to which you should try and get to know someone. And then he says there's 3 databases that make up your collection of previous partner experiences. There's your stereotypes, and those are the ways that a partner is similar to your fixed and conventional opinions. Your associations, and that's ways that a partner reminds you of someone else. And then your ideals, which is the ways that a partner fits your ideal hopes and standards. And you want to make sure you don't fill in gaps by being overly idealistic, because trust, again, can positively alter your view and block out shortcomings while highlighting their strengths. But it is like, it's just part of getting to know someone that at the beginning of a relationship, your trust profile of that partner is going to be more influenced by what you fill in than by what they contribute. Just as time goes on, though, it should be more about who they're showing themselves to be than what you are thinking they are. And this really, really stood out to me because forgiveness is so important. Forgiveness, we need to forgive. We need to forgive everyone. But he says, forgive but don't trust. So
yeah, those are just 2 separate issues.
But sometimes people try to convince you that if you've forgiven me, then you trust me. And if you're not trusting me, then you haven't forgiven me. And that's what I would like this cycle.
Very different.
You don't trust me, so you haven't forgiven me. And I was like, that's not the case.
Exactly. I love this. This is really long, but I really, really, really love this. So he said, forgiveness is the act of facing the pain and anger that someone has brought into your life and letting go of any need or desire to pay that person back. Trust, on the other hand, is a confidence in the integrity of a person to act in a particular way. Forgiveness is past-oriented, trust is present and future-oriented. Forgiveness is about letting go, trust is about holding on. Forgiveness is something undeserved, trust is something earned.
Amen.
Yep. There it is right there.
Amen to that. And that's the thing. I think, when I look at people in my past, when you totally forgive, it's very freeing. But it's also really freeing to not trust, especially when you see them repeating some of the old patterns. It's just, and that doesn't mean we need to write people off forever. I do think people change. I think people can get to a point where they're not going to hurt you that way ever again. And so I'm not saying that people should never, be friends with or even revisit a relationship. It's just, I think we got to be really careful with that, though.
Yes. Yeah. And then he has these 8 personal traits that are strongly associated with stable and fulfilling marriages. And it spells marriage. It's like, are they mature?
Precious and darling.
Are they mature? Which is basically the ability to delay gratification and put someone else's interest before their own. Are they adaptable? Are they responsible? Are they relational? Which would be like a need for companionship or interaction. Are they insightful? So can they understand themselves from other perspectives? Can they figure out like what it is that's going on internally? Are they assertive? And that's expressing what's in your mind in inappropriate ways. Giving, and that's enjoying making others happy, and emotionally stable. So I want to keep that in mind. So 11, if I scratch your back, will you scratch mine? And this is like relying on someone. So he says, mutually embracing needs leads to a deeply satisfying relationship. And as your relationship gets more serious, you want to talk through the ways that you and your partner might meet each other's needs. Watch out for polarization. That's when you think that your needs and perspectives are like totally opposite from your partner's. And that cripples your ability to meet each other's needs. And satisfying relationships have a simple formula. It's two people meeting each other's needs. And keep in mind that changes result in new needs, and they often require new ways to meet those needs. And you need to protect your love feelings during those challenging times. Like he's saying, like we were saying back at the beginning, it's not always going to be perfect. Like relationships change. Even within a long-term marriage, things change. You want to hang on to those positive love feelings and protect those during these hard times.
Yeah, don't necessarily give up easily. You know,
yeah.
I like what you said earlier about what was it? I just drew a blank. So see, we all do it. Anyway, go ahead, and I'll think of it.
Back, jump in, and then anybody can become a jerk. A good partner can become a jerk or a jerkette when forces either outside or inside the relationship make him or her self-absorbed. And I love how he said, it's not until love requires sacrifice that it earns the right to be called love. So
I think that's what I was going to say, is that we got to remember that the way we see people is a combination of how they actually behave and how we interpret that behavior. Mm-hmm. And I do see a lot of people who've been hurt. You know, of course, as a therapist, I'm working with couples all the time. And sometimes it's an issue of the person is really hurting them, you know, and in some ways they might not be recognizing how much, and they need to be more aware that, you know, and not blame themselves. But in a lot of cases, I see behavior that's not that hurtful, and the other partner is just presuming the worst, you know, mm-hmm. like, and especially people who've been betrayed, you know, and they will just think every behavior is he or she is going to cheat on me. Mm-hmm. And it's like they have never even thought of cheating on them. There's never been any behaviors like that, and in a second relationship, and that is brutal, you know. And that's where there's no trust where there should be. You know, mm-hmm. They really have earned that trust, and it's not earned because they're holding on to that pain of someone who they couldn't trust, you know?
Right. Yes.
And so as long as we remember that just because I'm feeling bad about this person doesn't mean they're bad. It could mm-hmm. be that I'm looking at them through dark glasses, and we need to be real about that too.
Yeah. Very valid. And then again, he's saying if you develop a reliance on your partner beyond your trust, so like those equalizer bars would be out of order, that's running risk for you. But keep in mind that no one enters a new relationship with a clean slate. And also keep in mind that some people might seem emotionally strong, but they might not be able to bond. And he says you want to maintain a healthy pace in developing your trust and reliance by keeping track of your IRA account, which is your investment of trust, a little bit beyond what you already know about them, and then reciprocity. So once you kind of invest trust, do they then do the same back for you? Right. And an accumulation of consistent experiences of meeting each other's needs. So keep an eye on that. Chapter 12, this is the second to last chapter. This is commit. And for me, because I was like relying and committing on someone, they're not the same, but it was a little hard for me to understand the difference. So this was good. It helped me to understand it. So hopefully it's helpful to other people here. But basically, like, the heart of commitment is this abiding spirit of belonging to each other. And he says it's intertwining of three strands, these feelings of I want to, I have to, and I am reluctant. So it says when you're considering the commitment potential of a partner, you want to make sure that you consider these qualities and consider them about yourself as well. Their individual level, like as an individual, what is their commitment potential? And then their family history and commitment potential, and their non-family commitment patterns and potential, and their conscience and commitment, because their commitment will only be as strong as the conscience that upholds that commitment. So the last chapter, how to have great sex, and really the question is, should we have sex? And he's talking about premarital. And he goes into studies about this, that the rate of recreational sex is super high right now. And the idea that it is recreational is the untrue belief that sex can be just a physical act with no emotional strings attached. Because sex, it says that's false. Sex is always relational, and it creates a turning point in a relationship and intensifies the desire for closeness and commitment. So it'll mess you up, basically.
You know, I think this is still applicable to us.
Yeah.
Because I can't tell you how many people we've talked to that have come on and said, well, sometimes I think because I've been in a relationship or in a marriage where sex was a problem, that I need to know beforehand. Like I need to kind of do the try before you buy sort of thing. And I think you are at that point when you're sexually intimate, that you're kind of expressing a commitment. And oftentimes people are like, well, I'm not necessarily ready to commit to that level, but I'm definitely ready to have sex. And I don't think that is just what I'm trying to think of the good word that's like on the tip of my brain for it. But essentially the people that I know that have gone through this, sometimes they walk away thinking it's not a big deal because it just wasn't working out. And the other person is left very damaged.
Yeah.
And it is a big deal.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It's not victimless. I don't know. That doesn't
Right.
sound like the right word, but you know what I'm trying to say on there. So,
yeah. Well, and it also, I absolutely understand what you're saying, but it also relates to us as far as the level or degree to which we involved in sexual touch. So like, are you going from just meeting somebody to like full on like second base, or, like, so he talks about how you want to make sure you have a preset stopping point for yourself, because body chemistry will work against you and you're going to be like, oh, wait, I didn't mean to go this far. So just keep in mind, your beliefs shape your choices, but your choices also shape your beliefs. Like what you are choosing to do now will shape your future beliefs, and the values you use influence the partner that you choose. And kind of what you were just talking about, Everett, he says sexual compatibility can be more accurately determined by chemistry and talk than by the act of premarital sex. And
in fact, I would say over the years, and not necessarily obviously in relationships, but I mean, although that too, but I've just found that there are so many ways so many things about people that reveal their, sexuality besides sexuality, you know what I mean? And they are like spot on, like, and I think almost having sex with them almost distracts from seeing those other things. And there's also things about people that are going to detract from good sex, and them having good chemistry with them could distract you from those things too.
Yeah. Well, and he's
not seeing the things in them that are going to destroy that chemistry later.
Yes. He talks a lot about how good sex, a lot of it is like delayed gratification and self-control. And so, hey, like dating, you can practice that for a long time. And if you can't manage to have self-control and delayed gratification when you're dating, then what makes you think the sex is going to be great anyway?
Yeah.
So he does say like, you do want to make sure you have chemistry. So if you don't have that chemistry and that attraction, especially after time, like if you're at this point when he's saying put in the time to really get to know someone, if it's not there, you might want to hesitate before you move forward with that. But definitely, and he walks the walk and talks the talk, because he and his wife were engaged. You know, they dated for, I don't remember how many years they dated, and then they were engaged, and they did not have sex before they got married. So it's not, I mean, this is not just based on his personal opinion. He references several studies, but he did actually also go through this. And so finally, he says that what the world needs now is pacemakers and trendsetters. So singles need and can learn vital skills that can be used in building a relationship and choosing a partner. That love is not a random force that mindlessly guides a person to the perfect partner, and that a person is responsible for using one's head in the interests of one's heart. He does have a website. It's called lovethinks.com, and it's he and his wife, his daughter, Morgan Van Cutlip. There are some free resources on there. She has like an Instagram. I don't know if she posts daily or how often, but she'll post like tips. They have courses, like online courses and stuff that you can do. And then I also shared, these are all linked. So from the website, I got these first 5. He has like a document that's a personal plan for change, which is way back to, I think, chapter 2 on like healthy people make healthy choices. And then he has kind of a worksheet sort of thing on exploring your own family background. And then 20 questions to ask about family, 20 questions about other people, 10 ways to increase intimacy. And then I have this, it's not like, the formatting's not great because I just threw it together, but these are the things where he said, like, ask these questions. And this is like, I can't even, a lot of pages long, 7 pages long. Of course, it's like way indented, but finding out about chemistry, complementarity, comparability, and I will share this in the chat right now. So, and the last thing that I didn't put on here, but I should have, and I'll find the link before I share it, or I'll just share it and then find the link. If you live in Utah, or if you know someone who lives in Utah, and we'll let you use their address, Utah State University has a free course around this book. And I think it's like 6 sessions. You can either do it in like 1 or 2 full days, or you can do like the 6 or 8 different 1-hour sessions, something like that. But it's a free course, and they have resources that they'll send to you. And I can put that link in there too.
Awesome.
I
live in Logan, so
I
should go and take that class.
So Vanessa, I was going to say that there's been people in the chat that have to leave early and stuff, and they've been giving me email addresses. So
okay.
Maybe people can share them, and then we can just email all the stuff that you've got to them if they're interested. Might be a good option.
Yeah, I was going to put the link in, and I like closed my window, and now I don't know where it is. There it is.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to get it.
What I'd like to do also is open it up for any questions. We're getting sort of towards the end here, but if anybody in the audience has any questions or any thoughts they would like to share around this topic, obviously we want to stay on topic, but feel free to raise your hand. We'll call on you one at a time. You can turn on your mic and your camera at that time and come on and ask your question. In the meantime, while we're kind of waiting for anybody that might have any questions, there's been a lot of talk in the very active chat tonight around this. So thank you very much, Vanessa, for putting this together.
Yeah.
One thing that, and John can probably speak a little bit more to this, but one thing that I believe personally is that oftentimes it's very easy to focus on what we want and to look at that book and say, okay, I'm going to look for a person who meets these criterias and I'm going to make sure I don't date a jerk. But sometimes the work needs to be done on us, right? Like we need to turn back inward and say, like we had talked about in previous relationships, what am I doing to bring all of these things to the table in a healthy relationship? Am I ready? Have I gone through and done my own work and make sure that I'm ready to provide all of those things to the other person so that I'm not the jerk, right? Like I don't want to marry a jerk, but I certainly don't want to be a jerk either. And so turning inward, I think, is possibly like some of the biggest work that we need to do. And either one of these, whether you're marrying a jerk or being the jerk, or a combination of both, is where we just get stuck in this marriage cycle of marriage, divorce, and people end up with 2, 3, 4, however many divorces. And it's that never ending cycle. John, I'm sure you've seen that before in your practice.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we do. We tend to attract alike, but not exactly alike. I would say we attract alike in our level of dysfunction, but not necessarily our style of dysfunction. And what I mean by that is, people kind of want polarity, we call it, the idea that, I kind of want somebody that's a good match for me, like sort of has some opposite kind of aspects to them. But that can backfire and attract opposite extremes too. So if I'm a super pushover, it's not unlikely that I'm going to find someone who's very controlling and manipulative. And if I tend to be really forceful and overbearing, I might attract somebody who kind of wants someone who will take charge, and they're kind of passive. And we got to be really careful about that. And one of the things I've noticed tonight that kind of meshes with what I do is balance. Balance is where you're going to be kept. That will keep you safe. It will attract really high quality, healthy people. And extremes will crush you. It will lead to disaster invariably. So I usually ask myself, how balanced am I? Am I overreacting? Am I brushing things under the rug? Like which side of the equation am I going too far on? And that doesn't mean I want to overcorrect and go off the other side of the freeway. What I need to do is just adjust it to a more balanced place. And so if I'm being a pushover, I just need to be more confident and more assertive. If I'm being overbearing, I just need to be a little bit more humble and patient with people, and that's part of that insight, that ability to see where I'm at and adjust. And, and the Buddhists have a phrase for that, flexibility is life, rigidity is death. And it's not just death, physical death, it's the death of relationships. If I get stuck somewhere, I'm killing things. I'm killing my own soul, and I'm killing relationships. I'm killing joy. But if I remain flexible, of course, you can become too flexible where you're just chaotic. You're all over the place. But even there, just flexibility, just that balance, flexibility with some structure, just kind of in between those two, and don't let it go to the extreme. So,
yeah,
hopefully that kind of helped.
Absolutely. Vanessa, question for you, kind of putting this back onto you a little bit and these principles. I mean, it's one thing to read a book, but what attracted you to this book in the first place?
Well, when I first found this book, I was physically separated. We were separated for like 3 years before our divorce was final. And I was not dating. I didn't actually even join any of the groups until things were finalized. But I just wanted, I was like, I want to know where I messed up. I don't know. I want to make more informed choices for the future. And I definitely feel like I got a lot out of this book and use it with people. So when Dr. Van Epp came to our study group, we were talking about it and like, how could you use this? And he said, honestly, somebody in the group said, I just tell people that I really like this book and I'm trying to date, like following these guidelines. Would you be interested in learning about it with me? And then kind of going through things together. So you can have it just be really like open and out there like that. Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but hopefully I kind of at least partially did.
Usually I would think a book like this, it kind of attracts us for one reason or another. And obviously you felt like you kind of had made some mistakes before in your picking, and I've had my counselor tell me before, like, hey, your picker is broken. And, I agree with that. Like, yeah, pretty true. But at the same time, whenever I come across something like this, I look at that and say, okay, well, clearly I'm picking the wrong people, but why? Like what's wrong with me that makes me want to go down that road with that person? And I can't change anybody else. I can't change anybody that I've, picked in the past relationship wise, but I can certainly change stuff about me that makes me kind of, whether it's just I'm naive or I'm ignorant to the fact that I bring a lot of these same traits to the table myself, whatever that might be. But I feel like for myself, when I read something like this or I look at something like that, I'm like, okay, I want to avoid that for sure. Like, I don't think anybody reads that book and says, oh, sign me up for a jerk relationship. But I also recognize for myself, it starts with me fixing me and whatever would cause me to choose somebody like that. Right. Like, yeah, there are healthy people I've run into who are like, I would never put up with that in a relationship. And for myself personally, in prior relationships, I've overlooked it. Like, well, once we get married, things will work out better. Or, and I love how he accentuated it's going to get worse in a relationship. Right. So if you got a problem now, getting into a marriage doesn't fix that. It makes it worse. Where I naively in the past have been like, well, if you get a temple marriage, like things will be better, right? Like, no, Everett, you're an idiot. Like, that's not how it works. So, anyways, I'm kind of rambling on here, but I believe that truly that the work starts in that book with ourselves.
As you're talking, Everett, I'm thinking of 3 questions we all need to ask ourselves. Maybe I should write a blog post on this or something, but one of them is, and I think this is the fundamental question: how well do I manage my own triggers, emotions, inner work? How much have I done? How well do I do that? Second one is, how well do I assess other people on where they're at? And then the last one, and then this is going to be the one that hurts. This is the hard one. How do I contribute to their madness? What did I do that contributed, like not only did not help them heal, but actually drove them further over the edge, and I'm going to hold them like if they, if they were addicted to something or to porn or to drug, or they cheated on me, or I'm not going to hold myself accountable for that ultimate behavior they chose. But at the same time, were there things that I did that really did trigger them? And I have to own that. And even if I'm only 10% of the problem, I just think there are a lot of people lying to themselves and saying, it's like, as soon as somebody cheats on me or they get addicted or they become avoidant or whatever, they're the problem and I did fine. And boy, we've got to avoid that temptation, and just realize, no, I'm not going to blame myself for their bad behavior, but at the same time, did I contribute to it somehow? And the reason I need to know that isn't to beat myself up over it. It's just to make sure that I don't fall into those patterns again. Because if I don't learn how to heal that, it's all going to happen all over again. And it will keep happening until the lesson is learned. Yeah. And the lesson is not about them. It's about me. You know, we got to be really clear about that. So
absolutely. And, you know, I've sat in counseling before, and they're like, look, you've got two choices. One, you can just split now and fix these things in a different relationship, or you can try and fix them now in this relationship. But one way or the other, you're going to have to face it and try and fix it.
right.
Because it will follow you if you are creating the problems. So, yeah, I just think that one of the things that we run into a lot, especially on the Facebook dating groups and mutual and other dating groups, I guess, is people who quickly want to ease that pain of a divorce or whatever and jump right back into another relationship. And I think, you know, this book is great because it kind of tells you to hit the brakes. Let's do some work. Let's look at that other person, but let's also turn this one inward too and look at ourselves. And let's clean up some messes before we jump into another situation. And just think that that situation, the grass is greener. It's going to be better. Oh, they're not like my ex. Maybe, but you're still you. And whatever you contributed to whatever happened last time, if you completely overlooked it and placated all the blame onto the other person, then, you know, you're going to be facing those issues again. And you've still got to do your work. We don't get out of this life without doing our own work. It's going to follow us one way or the other. So